presence, and thanks for Kevin. This light is so strong, I don't see anyone. Yeah, I guess a lot of people don't know who I am because I'm not as famous, and I'm not actually, I'm nobody. So I'm not even an architect, and whenever I was invited, I said, you know, actually you can turn off the lights, it's okay, because the slide is, it's too bright now. Huh? The light. Oh, okay. I don't know how this works. How do I turn my slides? How do I turn the slides? Ah, okay. Okay. Sorry. So yeah, when I was invited, I said I'm not even an architect, so you know I don't know if I have anything to contribute to this conference, but I hope that you find something in my presentation. Kevin's presentation was very thought-provoking, and actually it's quite related to the things I want to talk about today. I didn't really use duality or dualism in my presentation. I didn't want to go to black and white, but I started thinking, whenever this topic was given to me, I started thinking about what does it mean, you know, in our world, this word duality. And I started to, I thought about how we get ideas and where our ideas come from. I think when you're an architect or if you're a designer, you start with an idea, and the idea is something very, it's not a physical thing, it's actually just very intangible. And the way ideas begin in this very intangible way, I find quite interesting that in the end this idea turns into a material thing most of the time when you do design or architecture. That the idea starts in your head, is something that you cannot touch, but then the end result is always, or most often, is about what is a physical thing and what is physically, you know, tangible in front of you that you can physically touch. And I thought maybe that's going to be my thread. It's going to be about when you create, it starts with the intangible and then it ends up with the tangible. And that's the duality I want to talk about. And how one triggers the other, but also does the other side, the end results, does it affect also the beginning? That's what I want to talk about. I kind of, you know, similar to Kevin, I want to talk about modern life and how the life we live today, and of course Kevin mentioned that we all come from different parts of the world, and I am from the northern hemisphere, and maybe I'm, you know, I don't have that same background as yours, but I think most of us now, because the world is so globalized, we live, and if we live in a city, we live modern lives. And modern life is a life that is quite organized, I would say. Even if you're in the tropics, I would say there's a lot of structure around what you do, and of course you might want to say that that structure is highly influenced from the northern hemisphere. And I think modern life, we actually never question it, especially young people today. I mean, I'm still young also myself, I'm not that old, but I think you're younger than me, and modern life is never questioned. It's like you're born and you are part of this modern life, and you never think about how life was before the modernity and this modern structure was designed for you. And because you don't question it, that's how your life is conditioned. The life, you know, the life we live today is, I think, most of us, we have the same way of living, the same way of consuming, and of, I I would say we don't survive, like Kevin was saying, we don't need to survive anymore, we don't need to hunt and fish, and some people still do in rural areas. But when you live in a city, we have this structure that's been designed for us, that we never chose to live this way, but we are given this comfort. The comfort of modern life is that everything is in fact quite easy to get and access, and we can consume, and we can eat, we can buy stuff, and we have plenty of things. We have, this is of course a picture from Japan, overload, overconsumption, and overload of everything. And of course you want to buy more things because this modern life is about that. It's about wanting to have more and acquiring more things, even if they're not necessary. You want more because you're just in a way kind of brainwashed, and you're conditioned to feel that way and to consume that way. And my question is, whenever when you have an idea as a designer or an architect, whether the way you start your idea, is that also conditioned by your environment? And I think yes, of course, the way your idea begins comes from the life you live and the way you live. And your ideas sometimes may be a little bit blinded by this whole consumer, over-consumerist type of society that we live in. And that our ideas very, are they good ones, or are they just yet another fake idea? That's kind of the question I have. When you design, most of the time, I think, for designers, architects, it's driven by this notion of urban life and the way we consume living this life, and everything that is produced by most designers today is about this consumption. And there are very few alternatives to design in a different context, I believe. That most designs are about consumption, unfortunately. And is there an alternative to that? Maybe some people don't know actually what I do. I have a design background, I'm a communication designer, but I've never worked in the kind of regular commercial design world. My work has always been about design for, it might sound very boring, I worked a lot for international organizations, and I've done a lot of work for social development and sustainable cultural development. Maybe that's very complex for you to understand what does it mean, but basically it's about how design can contribute to more basic things. It's not about yet another product to buy, to consume. It's not yet another tangible thing that you want to buy, but it's more about creating awareness about how creative thinking can lead to better lives and help people get better societies. So what I focus on, instead of the consumer urban thing, I focus more on these things: the life, culture, people, making, building, sustaining. And a lot of times the ideas that I have are not actually about creating an end product. Very rarely I actually create a physical product. It's more about the way you think as a creative person and how that way of thinking can alter the way people live and the priorities of people's lives. That at the heart of everything, perhaps instead of placing consumerism at the heart of it, you might want to place more intangible things, like very basic things, like maybe feelings, human connections, and how people can actually have a better understanding of who they are, and understand what it means to actually create something that is not about a superficial outcome, but something more meaningful that adds something to people's lives. And that's something extremely intangible. It's very hard to measure something like that. It's very hard to say, this is what I've done, because it's not like a product, like this is my outcome. It's something much more abstract. But I think design, and I don't know about architecture, but I think architecture also, I'm not an expert, but I would say because it's about space, it's about how you feel about a space and how you experience a space. Those are the intangible things of architecture that are very important, maybe more important than the actual physical result. So I want to kind of, think about this. Maybe this is one of the dualities I want to think about, this what we acquire versus what we experience, and how what we acquire is often the priority in this world we are living in today, but ultimately the experiences are the things that stay with us, I think, in the long term. Things you buy, you can buy something and actually a few months later you've forgotten about it and you don't even remember what you have. But I think an experience, when it's a strong experience, it stays with you and it's part of you, and it's something much stronger than an object. And in that sense, I think creativity is also about creating the experience rather than creating the tangible things. It's about how you make people feel. It's not about what you want people to buy. It's how they feel, and to feel a certain way can alter the way people behave. And that, I think, is ultimately very important, because behavior, the way we think about our world, is also about how sustainable it will remain, how the world can continue being a healthy place as opposed to a place that's deteriorating itself. So again, similarly, what we want to have and what we really need. Most of the time, I would say that things, objects and things that are physical, that you acquire, and that you obviously want to have because you see it on an advertising, or you want to buy it because the marketing is great, the brand is great, and it's something cool to have, and you feel like it's the must thing to have lately, and that's, if you don't have it, you're not, cool enough. And I think that that sort of thing is a very short-term satisfaction, that you buy it and then you immediately, that satisfaction is gone as soon as you acquire that thing. But with things we really need, I think, in terms of just humans in general, no matter where you are, no matter where you come from, I think that, like certain feelings that are absolutely necessary, I think, to survive as humans. Things like, happiness, and, of course, it's all debated, what is happiness? But the happiest people in the world are not the people who have the most things. And it's quite famous that, there are more depressed people in the United States than there are in Africa, for example. And yet Americans have so much more in terms of material things. And what does that say? Does it, does that mean that what are the human needs are actually more based on feelings rather than objects and things. And that makes me question about the role of designers, and whether designers actually, if their role is about producing more goods, or whether they should actually concentrate more on creating feelings and generating feelings that are positive and make people feel good about themselves and want to live in, sustainable societies, as opposed to very, mass consumption-oriented ones. I think that in a lot of design briefs, or maybe, in the creative world, it's always about, when you think about ideas, it's always about the future, and how the idea is always projected into the future. It's like, oh, my next idea will be this, or like, it's always kind of something that's ahead of us. And then we have this vision, we always think, oh, the future will be something, and we'll have these great things. Or, of course, you can be very pessimistic and think, oh, the future is very gloomy, and where are we heading to? But I think we focus a lot on the future, and not much on the present. That the tendency for creative people is to always look ahead, but to never really look at what you have now. And that's something I think is wrong. It's very important to learn how to appreciate the present. That what you have in front of you is so obvious, but you actually forget about it. And you forget about looking at what you have. And I was recently reading about one of the Japanese concepts of beauty, which you might have heard. There's a concept called wabi-sabi, which wabi is about not having enough. And there have been comparisons between modern life and the principles of this wabi-sabi philosophy. And basically, everything that's modern is projected into the future. But everything that's wabi-sabi is actually focusing on the present. And it's really about understanding the value of what we have now, as opposed to what we want to have. I think it's something to think about. I find it very important to not forget about that way of seeing things, that way of appreciating the present, as opposed to always projecting those ideals. And it's a bit like those the magazine covers that we saw earlier, that those are those ideals, and you always think, oh, I want to be this, I want to be that, I want to live in a house like this, or I want to have a haircut like that, or, but what is it that you have, and how can you appreciate what you have, and how can you learn learn to appreciate that? I guess I'm a bit of a weirdo, but I like to imagine the present as a dream, and the present is like, in fact, if you really take the time to look at what's around you, and perhaps not many people do that, but I do that quite a lot, you can really imagine all kinds of things, and you get lost within your own reality, and all those things that are actually in front of you become quite extraordinary. I don't know if it's an ability that you develop, if it's something, it's a perception that you have to learn and you have to kind of work on it. But I think, try if you haven't done it before. But for me, it's something quite eye-opening to be able to take the time to look at what's around you and try to think of the inspiration that's in your surrounding environment, as opposed to looking for it in places that are not yours, in places where you not actually physically in. Try to use your surroundings and try to find that inspiration from there. I think that a lot of times, we have very simple things, very simple, ordinary things, and they are quite inspiring, but it's about learning how to look at them in a new way again. And here, I imagine that there's so many things that you're taking for granted just because it's part of your everyday life. But everyday life is actually quite, it can be the premise for new ideas. And ideas are not necessarily things that are out of your reach, that are, far away from you. They can be very close to you. They can be about very basic things that you do. And that's one way of triggering an idea in your head. And to me, those ideas would be more real than something that you take from another magazine or something that you try to, emulate from something else. That the ideas, the truest ideas, the strongest ideas actually come from everyday life. Because it's about life itself, is about things that, are basic, necessary for your living and survival. And yet it's like, because it inspires culture and, creativity, there's something authentic about that. I might go a little bit faster. This is a Japanese movement that was actually based on those kind of very ordinary, handcrafted art, and the principles were basically about promoting the most ordinary things in life and trying to find the beauty in them. And that beauty in the end is not about, it's beyond ugliness, or it's beyond the physical appearance. That beauty is much more than what you look at. It's something that is beyond what you look at. It's beyond the visual. It's about the emotions. It's about feelings. It's a whole other dimension. Design as exploration. I think it's similar to this whole mountain thing that we heard earlier about, do you want to climb up the mountain because you want to look at the world? I think when you're a creative person, you have to be an explorer. And actually, I read a very interesting article recently that the 21st century designer and creative should be an explorer. It's all about exploration. And what does it mean, exploration? What is it that you explore? Is it about traveling? Is it about, just looking around and trying to discover new things? I think it's an attitude of how you practice your creative thinking. And everything should be about that, having that curiosity to discover things, to want to learn things. And that's something it's so important when you're a creative person, to have that curiosity. I want the young generation to have that curiosity and to have that hunger to learn things, and and that learning is really, right now you're in school and you're still within that kind of educational context, but I think that learning is such a lifetime thing, and that in fact you will learn incredible amount of things once you've left, and you have to keep that openness for learning and the acceptance that what you've learned right now, you'll forget about it. It will stay somewhere inside of you. You'll forget about it and you'll go back to it maybe 10 years later, 20 years later. But once you learn something, you have to forget and then ignore it and then go back and discover other things. But you have to keep that openness to want to learn things and to explore, because that's where your ideas will be fed, and they'll be, they will grow from there. The ideas will not grow from the magazine covers. They will grow from you exploring and having a feeling inside of you that that is what you want to do and that is your thing. It's not someone else's, it's how you feel about what you have seen, what you've experienced, and how you translate that experience into your work. I recently started a kind of mini article series about design objects, and it's actually related to this whole idea of exploration, that behind everything is a story, no matter what it is. This microphone has a story, that who invented this thing and how did it come about. And so I think in the exploration is also about questioning your environment and what you acquire, what you have. Why this? Why not that? Why is the city you live in looking in that certain way? It's about trying to find out the reason behind things. That nothing was actually just happened like that out of the blue. There is a reason why something exists. And so every idea in the beginning that is so intangible, but then it becomes something, some individual or some group of individuals actually came up with that, but there's a reason behind, and I think it's important to always think that that reason was there in the first place, and that you shouldn't take things for granted, that you shouldn't accept everything, that sometimes there are things that you should not accept because they're probably bad ideas or bad results of ideas, and it's always good to know why something came about. This one is a teapot. It's a Japanese iron cast pot that was invented 900 years ago, and this article I'm writing is about the story of why this came about 900 years ago, and why does it still exist today, and how cultures so strong can survive for thousands of years. And most of those most relevant ideas, the ideas that survive for centuries, are because they're embedded in everyday life and they have meaning in people's lives. That's usually, the secret behind why an idea will continue. The idea has to be relevant and has to be meaningful for people. And they have cultural value. So I'll just go through my slides because I think I've been talking for, I don't know how long I'm supposed to be talking. Just go through the slides of questioning, again, why things are done and why things are, certain shapes are, made, and where do that shape comes from, and the materials that we use, and how ideas are also about the physical things that you have around, the natural materials that you have around, and how those things also affect the way you do things. These are projects about the social aspects of design that I work on. And when I say outside of design, because I think most design people are quite obsessed with design, and it's the same with architects. When I say design, it's always combining design and architecture, and I'm sure that bothers architects because they don't like to be integrated into the whole mix. But I think that, and I imagine also, I've worked, or I know a lot of architects, and they're very kind of within their architecture worlds, and I think you have to get out of it and see what's happening outside of it. So the exploration is also about not isolating yourself and kind of building yourself, kind of building those walls around you, and not forgetting to look at what is outside of your own practice. Because in the end, your practice is also about life itself. So you have to understand what people need, what people want, what people are looking for to make their lives better. It's not just about, oh, here's another nice building, here's another nice design. In the end, it's about how that person will feel and how that person will experience it. So you have to explore outside of design and try to understand how can your design impact people who don't necessarily understand the very complexity of architecture or design. They don't know the theories, but they just will take your work as an experience. So outside of design, I think, to me, it's very important to see how things can happen and affect